Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones planning our destruction. What I discovered about my son's wife nearly cost him his life, but it led to the most satisfying revenge I've ever orchestrated. If you've ever wondered how far a mother will go to protect her child, this story will show you exactly what happens when maternal instinct meets calculated betrayal. Make sure to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale of justice has traveled. On a crisp Tuesday morning in Boston, Massachusetts, my world was about to shatter in ways I never imagined. The aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the scent of jasmine from my prized garden filled our historic brownstone. I was preparing for another day at Sterling Cosmetics, the luxury makeup empire I'd built from nothing after my husband's death 15 years ago. My son Marcus was already dressed in his tailored navy suit, ready for his position as senior partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Watching him adjust his tie in the hallway mirror filled me with the same pride I'd felt since he was a boy. In the kitchen, my daughter-in-law Sophia moved with practiced elegance. Her auburn hair swept into a perfect chignon. She hummed softly while preparing our morning meals, carefully portioning food into matching containers. A larger portion for Marcus, a smaller one for me. The morning sunlight caught the diamond bracelet I'd given her last Christmas, sparkling as she worked. I stood in the doorway, admiring her dedication to our family routine. "You spoil us both, darling," I said, unable to hide my affection. Not many daughters-in-law would take such care with breakfast preparation. Sophia turned, her emerald eyes brightening with what I believed was genuine warmth. "Family takes care of family, Mother Sterling. Besides, with both of you working such demanding schedules, proper nutrition is essential." Her words touched me deeply. I had always seen Sophia as the daughter I never had, sophisticated, thoughtful, and completely devoted to Marcus. As we prepared to leave, Sophia handed me the smaller container while placing the larger one in Marcus's briefcase. I tucked it carefully into my designer handbag, marveling at her attention to detail. Sophia had always been the perfect addition to our family. She made Marcus happy, supported his career ambitions, and treated me with genuine respect. I walked out the door that morning completely unaware that this simple container would expose a web of deception that had been growing right under my nose. At lunch, my executive assistant knocked on my office door. "Mrs. Sterling, there's been a mix-up with the lunch containers. Marcus just called. He has your smaller portion and you have his." I laughed, shaking my head at the innocent mistake. When I opened Marcus's container, I immediately noticed something odd. The rim was dusted with fine white granules that looked like crystallized salt. "How peculiar," I murmured, examining it more closely. Sophia must have been experimenting with some new seasoning blend. I decided to take it to Dr. Richard Hayes, my company's chief medical advisor and longtime friend. Richard had been a toxicologist before joining Sterling Cosmetics as our product safety director. His office was just down the hall, filled with certificates and awards that spoke to his expertise in chemical analysis. "Richard, look at this," I said with amusement, showing him the container. Sophia seems to have gotten creative with Marcus's breakfast. These white crystals look almost like rock salt, but they're so fine and uniform. Richard took the container and moved to his desk lamp, tilting it under the bright light. He rubbed a small amount between his fingers, then brought it closer to examine. Suddenly, his face went completely white. The easy smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of absolute horror. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "who prepared this food?" My amusement faded instantly. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. "Sophia, of course. She prepares all our meals." "Why, what's wrong?" Richard set the container down with trembling hands. His voice was urgent, almost frantic. "You need to get Marcus to a hospital immediately. Right now. Don't delay. Don't make phone calls, just go." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Richard, you're scaring me." "What are you talking about?" He gripped my shoulders, his eyes intense with fear. "Eleanor, I can't explain everything right now, but those aren't salt crystals. If I'm right about what this is, Marcus is in serious danger. Every minute counts." The gravity in his voice stopped all my questions. I trusted Richard implicitly. He would never joke about something like this. I grabbed the container and my purse, my hands shaking as I called my driver. "James, meet me at the front entrance immediately." We're going to Massachusetts General Hospital, and please hurry." During the 20-minute ride through Boston traffic, I sat clutching that container like it held the key to my son's survival. The familiar streets seemed foreign and threatening. Yellow cabs honked, pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks, but everything felt distant and surreal. At the hospital, I approached the reception desk with barely controlled panic. "I need someone to analyze this food container immediately. I believe it contains something dangerous." The nurse looked skeptical until I mentioned Richard's name and his position at Sterling Cosmetics. Within minutes, a laboratory technician in a white coat took the sample, and I was directed to a waiting area that smelled of disinfectant and fear. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. I paced the sterile hallway, my Louboutin heels clicking against the polished floor. Images of Marcus flooded my mind. His first day of law school, his wedding day when he looked so happy with Sophia, the recent evenings when he'd complained of fatigue and stomach issues. "Just work stress, Mom," he'd said. "The new partnership demands are brutal." How could I have been so blind? Finally, Dr. Patricia Chen emerged from the laboratory, her expression grave. She sat beside me holding a detailed report. "Mrs. Sterling, we've analyzed the food sample you brought in. It contains significant levels of thallium sulfate, a highly toxic compound that's virtually tasteless and odorless." The words hit me like physical blows. "Thallium?" I whispered. Dr. Chen nodded solemnly. "It's often called the perfect poison because it's so difficult to detect. Symptoms include fatigue, digestive issues, hair loss, and neurological problems. If consumed regularly over time, it can cause organ failure and death." I felt the room spinning around me. "How long?" "Based on the concentration we found, if your son has been consuming this regularly, he could have been slowly poisoned for months. The good news is that we can treat thallium poisoning if we catch it in time, but we need to start immediately." I managed to thank Dr. Chen before stumbling to the bathroom, where I was violently sick. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about Sophia, about our perfect life together, it was all a lie. I called Marcus from my car, trying to keep my voice steady. "Darling, I need you to come to Mass General right away. Tell them you need emergency toxicology testing. Don't tell anyone else, especially not Sophia." Marcus's voice was confused but concerned. "Mom, what's going on? You sound terrified. Please, just trust me. Come now, and don't eat or drink anything until you get here." I hung up before he could ask more questions, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. When Marcus arrived at the hospital an hour later, his face was pale with worry. "Mom, what's this about?" "The doctors are talking about poison testing." I took his hands, looking into his eyes, the same warm brown eyes I'd gazed into when he was a baby. "Marcus, I need you to be strong for what I'm about to tell you. Someone has been slowly poisoning you. The white crystals on your food container this morning were thallium sulfate." The color drained from his face completely. "That's impossible. Who would— Sophia?" The word came out as barely a whisper. I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks. "The evidence is undeniable, darling. Richard identified it and the hospital confirmed it. Those stomach pains, the fatigue, the headaches you've been having, they weren't from work stress." Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "But she loves me. We've been married for 3 years. She takes care of everything, prepares all my meals." His voice broke. "Why would she want to hurt me?" I sat beside him, wrapping my arms around my grown son like I had when he was small. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. Right now, we need to focus on getting you healthy and making sure she can't hurt you anymore." The blood tests confirmed our worst fears. Marcus had dangerous levels of thallium in his system, consistent with chronic poisoning over several months. The doctors immediately started chelation therapy to remove the toxins from his body. That evening, while Marcus was receiving treatment, I drove home with a heart full of rage and determination. Sophia was in the living room, perfectly composed as always, reading a fashion magazine. "How was your day, Mother Sterling?" she asked with that radiant smile I now knew was completely false. "Productive," I replied, forcing myself to remain calm. "I had lunch with some potential investors. They were very interested in expanding Sterling Cosmetics internationally." I watched her face carefully. Did I imagine the slight tightening around her eyes at the mention of business expansion? That sounds wonderful. I'm sure you'll make the right decisions for the company's future. Her tone was supportive, but something felt off. I excused myself and went to my study, where I kept all my important documents. I needed to understand what Sophia stood to gain from Marcus's death. I pulled out my will and estate planning documents, spreading them across my mahogany desk. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. According to the terms I'd established, if Marcus predeceased me, Sophia would inherit his share of Sterling Cosmetics, nearly 40% of a company worth over $200 million. But there was more. As his widow, she would also inherit his personal assets, his trust funds, and his stake in various investments. If I died after Marcus, she would be positioned to control the entire Sterling empire. I sat back in my leather chair, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Sophia's casual questions about company valuations, her subtle inquiries about my health, her insistence on preparing all our meals. She had been playing a long game, positioning herself to inherit everything while maintaining the facade of a devoted wife and daughter-in-law. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. The next morning, I called my attorney, James Morrison, to my office. James, I need to discuss some changes to my estate planning. Specifically, I'm considering establishing a charitable foundation and leaving the majority of my assets to various causes. I made sure to speak loudly enough for Sophia, who was arranging flowers in the adjacent room, to overhear. That's very noble, Eleanor, James replied, following my lead. When would you like to implement these changes? Within the next 2 weeks, I said firmly. I want everything finalized before the end of the month. I saw Sophia pause in her flower arrangement, her body going rigid. She continued working, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. That evening, she was unusually quiet during dinner, picking at her food and checking her phone repeatedly. You seem distracted, darling, I commented. Is everything all right? She looked up with a forced smile. Just tired from work. The gallery has been so demanding lately. But her eyes were calculating, distant. Late that night, I heard her whispering urgently on the phone in her room. I crept closer to the door, my heart pounding. No, we can't wait any longer, she was saying. The old bat is planning to give everything away to charity. It has to happen this week, or we lose everything. My blood turned to ice. Not only was she poisoning Marcus, but she had an accomplice. The next day, I contacted Detective Sarah Martinez at the Boston Police Department. We'd met at various charity events, and I knew she specialized in white-collar crimes. I told her everything, the poisoning, the will, the overheard phone conversation. Sarah listened intently, taking detailed notes. Mrs. Sterling, this is extremely serious. We'll need to gather evidence carefully to build a solid case. I'm going to work with our toxicology team to set up surveillance. Within 24 hours, the police had installed microscopic cameras throughout our kitchen, invisible to the naked eye. Detective Martinez and I sat in an unmarked van outside the house, watching live footage on small monitors. My hands were clenched so tightly my nails left marks on my palms. At exactly 7:30 in the morning, we watched Sophia enter the kitchen and begin preparing breakfast. She moved with her usual grace, but when she thought no one was watching, her expression became cold and calculating. We watched in horror as she retrieved a small glass vial from behind the coffee canister. The label was partially visible, thallium sulfate. She unscrewed the cap and carefully measured out a precise amount of the white crystalline powder, sprinkling it into Marcus's coffee and stirring it until it dissolved completely. Then she sealed the container, replacing it in its hiding spot, and resumed her normal breakfast preparation routine. The transformation back to loving wife was seamless and chilling. We have her, Detective Martinez said grimly, signaling to her team, but I held up my hand. Wait, I want to see how far she'll go. Let's give her enough rope to hang herself. Detective Martinez looked concerned. Mrs. Sterling, your son's life is at risk. Marcus is safe, I assured her. He's staying at a hotel under police protection, and I've already told him about the cameras. But I want Sophia to reveal her entire plan and expose her accomplice. That afternoon, I put my own plan into motion. I called Sophia from my office, making sure my voice carried the right amount of distress. Darling, something terrible has happened. Marcus collapsed at work and had to be rushed to the hospital. The doctors think it might be his heart. There was a pause before Sophia responded, and when she did, her voice was perfectly modulated with just the right amount of concern. "Oh my God, I'm coming right away." "Which hospital?" "Mass General," I said. "I'm heading there now." I drove to the hospital, where Marcus was waiting in a private room, perfectly healthy but playing his part as a poisoning victim. The doctors had agreed to help with our sting operation. When Sophia arrived, she rushed to Marcus's bedside, her face a mask of worry and devotion. "My love, what happened? Are you in pain?" Marcus played his role perfectly, looking weak and disoriented. "I don't know. I felt fine this morning after breakfast. Then suddenly..." He trailed off, closing his eyes as if exhausted. Dr. Chen entered the room, her expression grave. "I'm afraid we found some concerning irregularities in your husband's blood work, Mrs. Sterling. We're running additional tests, but his symptoms are consistent with toxic exposure." Sophia's face showed just the right amount of shock and confusion. "Toxic exposure? How is that possible?" The performance was flawless, but I could see the satisfaction lurking behind her concerned expression. Over the next 3 days, I watched Sophia play the devoted wife to perfection. She brought Marcus flowers, sat by his bedside reading to him, and even cried convincing tears when she thought no one was looking. But the police cameras caught her true nature during private moments. The cold smiles when Marcus appeared to be sleeping. The hushed phone conversations where she discussed finalizing everything once he's gone. On the 4th day, Detective Martinez and I put the final phase of our plan into motion. I called Sophia at the hospital, my voice breaking with manufactured grief. "Sophia, darling, you need to come home immediately. The doctors, they say Marcus isn't going to make it. His organs are shutting down from the toxins. I can't bear to be alone right now." There was a pause that lasted just a fraction too long before Sophia responded with appropriate shock and sorrow. When Sophia arrived home, her eyes were red from what appeared to be genuine tears. She embraced me, and for a moment I almost forgot she was a cold-blooded killer. "Mother Sterling, I'm so sorry. The doctors, did they say how much time?" "Hours," I whispered, letting my voice break. "Maybe days if we're lucky. But Sophia, there's something else. With Marcus gone, everything changes. The will, the company, you'll be inheriting responsibilities you never expected." I watched her face carefully. Behind the mask of grief, I saw a flicker of anticipation. "I don't want to think about that right now," she said, but her tone lacked conviction. "Marcus is my whole world. Nothing else matters." But even as she spoke, I could see her mind calculating, planning for her future as a wealthy widow. That evening, Sophia excused herself to make phone calls, supposedly to inform friends and family about Marcus's condition, but the police recordings captured her real conversations. "Yes, it's happening faster than we planned," she whispered to her unknown accomplice. "By tomorrow night, I'll be a widow with controlling interest in a $200 million company. Then we just have to wait for the old woman to have her accident, and everything will be ours." The next morning, I told Sophia I was returning to the hospital for what might be Marcus's final hours. Instead, I went to the police station, where Detective Martinez and her team were preparing for Sophia's arrest. "We have everything we need," Martinez assured me. "The poisoning, the conspiracy, the motive, it's all recorded. When we bring her in, she won't be able to deny any of it." But I had one final act of revenge planned. "Detective, I want to confront her myself first. Let her know that I've known all along, that her perfect plan was never going to work." Martinez looked uncertain. "Mrs. Sterling, that could be dangerous. If she realizes she's been caught..." "She's not violent," I said firmly. "She's a coward who relies on poison because she doesn't have the courage for direct confrontation. Please let me have this moment." An hour later, I walked into our house to find Sophia in the living room, dressed entirely in black as if already in mourning. She looked up as I entered, her face composed in an expression of grief. "How is he?" she asked softly. I stood in the doorway, studying the woman I had welcomed into my family, the woman who had planned to destroy everything I held dear. "He's dead," I said flatly, watching her reaction. For just an instant, before she could compose herself, I saw pure relief flash across her features. Then the mask slipped back into place, and she covered her face with her hands, sobbing convincingly. No, it can't be. My poor Marcus. My beautiful husband. She stood and moved toward me as if seeking comfort, but I stepped back. The interesting thing about thallium poisoning, I said conversationally, is how it mimics natural illness. Fatigue, digestive problems, eventual organ failure. Very difficult to detect unless someone knows exactly what to look for. Sophia froze, her hands still covering her face. Slowly, she looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment she realized her charade was over. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You're in shock, Mother Sterling. The grief is making you say strange things. I walked to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photo of Marcus and Sophia from their wedding day. They looked so happy, so innocent. Now I knew it had all been an elaborate lie. Tell me, Sophia, I said, still not looking at her. How long have you been planning to kill my son? Did you start before you married him, or was it a more recent inspiration? The silence stretched between us. When I finally turned around, Sophia was standing perfectly still, all pretense of grief abandoned. Her face was cold and calculating. You can't prove anything, she said quietly. Marcus is dead, just like you said. A tragic case of mysterious illness that baffled the doctors. I smiled, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. Actually, Marcus is very much alive. He's been in protective custody for the past week while we gathered evidence of your attempts to murder him. The color drained from Sophia's face completely. That's impossible. I saw him in the hospital. He was dying. He was acting, I replied calmly. Quite convincingly, I thought. But then he learned from the best. You've been acting the part of devoted wife for years while slowly poisoning him with thallium. Sophia's composure finally cracked. You don't understand, she said desperately. I never wanted to hurt him. But you were going to give everything away to charity. All that money, all that power, it would have been wasted on strangers when it could have secured our future. Whose future? I asked. Yours and your mystery accomplices? Yes, we know about your partner in this scheme. At that moment, the front door opened and Detective Martinez walked in with 2 uniformed officers. Sophia Sterling, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. As they read her rights, Sophia looked at me with pure hatred. You think you've won, but you've lost your son either way. He'll never forgive you for destroying his marriage, for humiliating him like this. But she was wrong. Marcus appeared in the doorway, very much alive and looking healthier than he had in months. The thallium had been flushed from his system, and the color had returned to his cheeks. He looked at Sophia with a mixture of pain and disgust. The only person who destroyed our marriage was you, Sophia. The moment you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. As the police led Sophia away, she turned back one final time. This isn't over, Eleanor. You think you're so clever, but money can't buy you love or loyalty. You'll die alone, just like you deserve. I watched through the window as they put her in the patrol car, feeling a deep satisfaction settle in my chest. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Sophia's plan. Her accomplice was revealed to be her ex-boyfriend, a con artist named David Chen, who had convinced her that together they could inherit and then liquidate Sterling Cosmetics for a quick fortune. They had been planning Marcus's murder for over a year, carefully researching untraceable poisons and establishing alibis. The trial became a sensation in Boston society. Sophia maintained her innocence right up until the prosecution played the recorded conversations where she discussed accelerating Marcus's death and planning my accident. When faced with overwhelming evidence, she finally broke down and confessed everything in exchange for a plea deal that would spare her the death penalty. Marcus recovered fully from the thallium poisoning, though the psychological scars took longer to heal. We spent many evenings talking about trust, about how people we love can sometimes be strangers wearing familiar faces. But our bond grew stronger through the ordeal. He returned to his law practice with a new appreciation for life and a healthy skepticism about people's motives. I kept my promise about the charitable foundation, but instead of donating my entire fortune, I established the Marcus Sterling Foundation for Victims of Domestic Poisoning. It provides resources for medical testing, legal support, and counseling for people who suspect they're being slowly poisoned by intimate partners. The foundation also funds research into detecting exotic toxins and trains medical professionals to recognize the signs of deliberate poisoning. Sophia was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. David Chen received 15 years for conspiracy and fraud. During her sentencing, Sophia looked directly at me and said, "I hope the money was worth losing the only daughter-in-law who ever truly cared about you." But by then, I knew the truth about her definition of caring. 6 months after the trial ended, Marcus met someone new, a pediatric surgeon named Amanda who had no interest in his wealth and actually earns more than he does. Their relationship developed slowly, built on genuine friendship and mutual respect. When Marcus brought her home to meet me, I saw immediately that this love was real. Amanda treats him like a partner, not a meal ticket. On quiet evenings, I sometimes think about Sophia and what drove her to such desperate measures. I believe she saw wealth as security and was willing to do anything to obtain it. But real security comes from being loved for who you are, not what you can provide. Marcus and I learned that lesson in the most painful way possible. The Sterling Cosmetics empire continues to thrive, with Marcus now serving as my business partner rather than just my heir. We've implemented new security measures and background checks for anyone who becomes intimately involved with our family. Trust, once broken so completely, requires constant vigilance to rebuild. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if I should feel guilty about the elaborate sting operation, about allowing Marcus to suffer through those terrifying days believing he was dying. But then, I remember Sophia sprinkling poison into his coffee, with that cold, calculating expression. And I know we did what was necessary to expose her true nature. The white crystals that started this whole nightmare are now evidence in a police storage facility, a reminder that evil sometimes comes in the most innocent-looking packages. But they also represent something else to me. Proof that a mother's intuition, combined with determination and the right allies, can overcome even the most carefully planned betrayal. If you're watching this and something feels wrong in your relationship, if your partner seems too interested in your finances, or if you're experiencing unexplained health problems, please don't ignore those instincts. Get help, get tested, and remember that the people who truly love you would never want you to suffer, no matter what they might gain from your pain. This story is based on real events, though names and some details have been changed to protect privacy. We share these experiences not to judge others, but to educate and hopefully prevent similar tragedies. I want to hear from you. What would you do in my situation? Would you have confronted the poisoner directly, or would you have involved the police from the beginning? Every story has the power to save a life, and I hope this one reaches someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to the end, and remember that justice sometimes requires patience, but it's always worth the wait.